My dad kicked me out because he and my stepmom had a baby. Karma quickly taught him a lesson. My name is Carla, and I'm 21 years old. My life has never been easy, especially after my mom passed away when I was just 10 years old. Losing her was the hardest thing I've ever gone through. She was my whole world, my rock, my comfort, and my biggest supporter. After she died, everything in my life changed. The house felt emptier. My dad became more distant, and I felt completely alone. I missed her every day and still do. She made everything feel safe and full of love. When I was 15, my dad told me he was seeing someone new. Her name was Linda. Not long after, he told me they were getting married. I still remember that moment clearly. He sat me down and said, "Carla, I think it's time I move on." He looked uncomfortable as he spoke. Then he added, "Linda is good for us." I remember feeling confused. "Us?" I asked, unsure what he meant. He explained, "Yes, us. She has a daughter your age. It might be nice for you to have someone around." Soon after that conversation, Linda and her daughter Megan moved into our house. Megan was 16 at the time, just a year older than me. At first, everything felt strange and unfamiliar. Linda tried to be polite, but she kept her distance. She was never rude, but I could tell she wasn't very comfortable either. Still, we managed. Megan and I slowly got to know each other. We started talking more, spending time together, and eventually, we became very close. Over time, we developed a strong bond and became like real sisters. We shared our feelings, helped each other through problems, and supported one another in a way that made life more bearable. After some time, Linda gave birth to a baby boy named Jimmy. That changed the household again. Linda decided to become a stay-at-home mom to take care of him full-time. From that point on, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Most of the attention and care went toward Jimmy, and I began to feel like I was slowly being pushed aside. Still, I tried to stay strong. When I turned 16, I got a job at the local grocery store. I wanted to earn my own money and not have to rely on my dad for everything. It gave me a sense of independence. I worked hard and saved money for the things I needed, like school supplies, clothes, and small personal items. Being able to pay for my own things made me feel proud and more grown up. But when I turned 18, my dad asked to talk to me in his office, which was just the spare room where he did his paperwork. He told me, without looking me in the eye, that I needed to start paying rent now that I was legally an adult. He said it would be a symbolic amount, just $500 a month. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was shocked and confused. "But Dad," I said, "why? I've been saving for college." But he insisted, saying, "It's time to contribute. You'll still get food and other essentials." I was hurt, but I didn't argue much. I agreed and started paying rent, even though it was hard to afford, on my part-time salary. I made it work because I didn't want to depend on anyone else. Then, just 5 months ago, things took another turn. My dad came into my room and Linda was standing behind him. He looked serious and said, "Carla, we need to talk." I could already tell something was wrong by the tone in his voice. He said Linda was pregnant again and they needed my room for the new baby. I was completely stunned. "What?" I asked. "You have 2 offices. Why can't you use one of those?" Linda stood there quietly, looking like she felt bad, but she didn't say a word. Dad repeated the same thing. "You need to move out." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I couldn't believe it. After everything I had done, after paying rent and helping out, they were kicking me out of the house. I didn't know what to do. I sat in my room feeling heartbroken, overwhelmed, and scared. I didn't have enough money saved yet to get a place of my own. I felt abandoned and alone again, just like after my mom died. So I picked up the phone and called my Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister. She had always been kind to me, and I didn't know who else to turn to. When I told her what happened, I was crying. I said, "Aunt Lisa, Dad is kicking me out. Can I stay with you?" She didn't even hesitate. "Of course you can stay with me," she said, clearly upset. "No rent needed. I'll handle your father." The very next day, my grandpa, my dad's father, showed up at our house. I was surprised to see him. He asked to speak to my dad privately. They went into another room, and I could hear their voices getting louder. I couldn't make out the exact words, but it was clear they were arguing. Grandpa was angry. After a while, he came out of the room and walked over to me. He looked sad and disappointed. He gave me a hug and told me not to worry anymore. He said I didn't deserve to be treated that way and that I always had a place in his heart. When Grandpa told me I had 3 choices, I felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. He said I could stay at Dad's house, move in with him and Grandma, or find a place of my own and he'd cover the rent. At first, I wasn't sure what to do. Even though I had been hurt, I still had some hope that things would improve. I told myself maybe Dad and Linda would soften. Maybe they just needed time to adjust. But that didn't happen. Things only got worse. Dad barely looked at me anymore, and Linda avoided me like I didn't exist. The air in the house had changed completely. Every interaction was cold, brief, and filled with tension. I felt like I was intruding in their home, even though it had once been mine. I tried to stay out of the way, keeping to my room, but even that didn't make a difference. There was no warmth left between us. Megan was the only one who noticed. She asked me once why they seemed so distant, but I didn't have an answer. I told her I didn't know, and I really didn't. I was doing my best to stay respectful and quiet. Yet still, they treated me like I didn't belong. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. I couldn't live like that anymore. So I called Grandpa and told him I was ready to move out. He didn't ask for explanations or pressure me. He just said he'd be there to help. I packed my things slowly over the course of a few days. Every item I put into a bag felt heavy with memories. Some good, some painful. There was no real goodbye from Dad or Linda. They just watched me leave like it was something they had been waiting for. Grandpa had already prepared one of his rental units for me. When I arrived, I was surprised by how thoughtful he had been. The apartment was small but clean and cozy. It had a fridge, a stove, basic furniture, everything I would need to start fresh. I hadn't expected that kind of care, and it touched me deeply. What made me even more emotional was when Grandpa handed me a check for $15,000. He told me it was to help me get started, and that I wouldn't have to pay rent as long as I was working or studying. I was speechless. I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude. I truly didn't know what I would have done without him. The first few weeks in the apartment were an emotional roller coaster. I felt free, and I loved the independence. It was empowering to make my own decisions and have a space that was mine alone. But I also missed parts of my old life. I missed Megan, who had been like a sister to me, and I missed little Jimmy. I didn't miss Dad or Linda much, but I mourned the idea of family, the one I had held on to for so long. I had very little contact with them during that time. They didn't reach out, and I didn't feel ready to make any moves either. After a few weeks, I felt the need to talk to someone who really understood me and could help me make sense of my emotions. So I went to see Aunt Lisa. The moment I stepped into her house, I felt lighter. She welcomed me with a warm hug, and we sat down to talk. I told her how I was doing and admitted that, despite everything, I missed the people I had left behind. She listened kindly, reminding me that choosing peace for myself didn't mean I didn't love them. It just meant I had finally put myself first. While we were talking, her son, my cousin, walked in and overheard part of the conversation. He made a comment that completely surprised me. He joked that Dad was probably missing me now because Grandpa was making him pay for what he did. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. Then he explained that Grandpa actually owned the house Dad lived in, and that after Dad kicked me out, Grandpa started charging him rent. Not only that, Grandpa also told him he had to repay the $15,000 he had given me. I sat there in shock. I had no idea Grandpa had been helping Dad financially all this time. I always assumed Dad was managing things on his own. It was a lot to take in. Aunt Lisa added that Grandpa had been supporting Dad quietly for years, paying for school, health costs, and even general household needs. And now, he was holding him accountable. Grandpa wasn't just supporting me out of love. He was making a statement. Everything began to make sense. Dad's sudden change in attitude, the coldness, the silence. He wasn't missing me because he felt guilty or because he cared. He was feeling the pressure from the responsibilities he had long pushed onto someone else. And now that the support came with conditions, it was finally catching up with him. I felt a mix of anger and disappointment. It hurt to realize that my dad hadn't been honest, that he had allowed someone else to support me while making me feel like I was a burden. I needed answers, more than what my cousin or aunt could give me. So I decided to visit Grandpa and Grandma. I wanted to hear their side of the story. When I arrived at their house, they welcomed me like always, with open arms and kind eyes. Grandma hugged me tightly and asked how I was settling in. I told her the apartment was perfect, and I thanked them again for everything. Even after everything that had happened, there were still so many questions in my mind. Questions I had buried because I didn't know if I could handle the answers. But now that I had moved out and gained some space to think, I felt stronger. I needed to know the full truth, especially about my dad. There was something in me that needed to understand why he had treated me the way he did, and how it had all come to that moment when he told me to leave. So I asked Grandpa directly. We were sitting in the quiet living room at his house. The sun was setting outside the window, casting a golden hue across the furniture. I looked at him, feeling nervous but steady. He let out a long sigh, and finally spoke with a calm and honest tone. He told me my father had been financially dependent on him and Grandma for many years. It wasn't just small help here and there. It was everything from education expenses to medical bills, and even everyday living costs. I sat there quietly, listening to him explain how they had stepped in again and again, making sure our family was supported even when it looked like my dad was the one providing. When Grandpa said that my being kicked out was the final straw, something shifted inside me. Until that moment, I had still clung to the belief that maybe Dad just made a mistake or acted out of pressure. But hearing that Grandpa had done so much in silence while Dad turned me away with no remorse, it hurt more than I expected. I felt the weight of disappointment settle on my chest. Grandpa explained that this wasn't done out of anger, but out of necessity. They had to show Dad that actions had consequences, especially when they hurt the people you're supposed to care for. It was the only way they could hold him accountable after all the years of enabling. I sat in silence for a bit. Then I asked something that had been bothering me since I left home. I wanted to know if Megan, Jimmy, and the new baby would be okay. I couldn't stop thinking about them and whether they'd be affected by the decisions Dad had made. Grandpa reassured me gently. He explained that they had planned for that too. They had set up separate support for all of us, including Megan. They wanted each of us to have equal opportunities, even if we weren't all related by blood. That small act of fairness and compassion meant everything to me. A wave of relief washed over me. I felt seen, supported, and genuinely cared for. I looked at Grandpa and told him how lucky I felt to have him and Grandma in my life. I meant every word. Their quiet, steady presence had held me together when I didn't even realize I was falling apart. As I drove back to my apartment later that evening, the truth settled in. It wasn't easy to accept everything I had learned, but I felt clearer. My heart still ached for my siblings, especially Megan, who had been like a sister and a friend when I needed someone the most. I missed Jimmy too, his innocent smile and his warm hugs. But as much as I missed them, I knew I couldn't go back to that house. Not now, and maybe not ever. My need for independence had grown stronger than my longing for the past. Still, I didn't want to lose my connection with Megan or the others. I promised myself I would make an effort to stay in their lives, even if it meant finding a new kind of balance. Megan and I started texting regularly. She would tell me about her day, her classes, things happening at school, or even funny moments with Jimmy. It felt good to have that bond still alive. I was careful not to involve her in the deeper family issues. She didn't deserve to be in the middle of it all. She was just a teenager trying to live her own life. A few days passed like that, quiet but steady, until I got a call from Dad. I hesitated before answering, unsure what to expect. He sounded different. He asked if we could meet for dinner. I agreed, partly because I was curious, and partly because a small part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, things could be a little better. We met at a quiet, almost empty restaurant. The atmosphere felt heavy from the start. We both sat down, unsure of how to start the conversation. After a while, Dad began to talk. He told me he was sorry for everything, that he missed me, and that the house didn't feel the same without me. Hearing those words was strange. I had wanted to hear them before, long ago when I was still living there, desperate for some kind of sign that he cared. But now they felt almost hollow. I responded honestly but carefully. I told him I missed him too, and that part of me still cared. But I also made it clear that I couldn't just pretend nothing had happened. I couldn't erase the pain or the choices that led me to where I was now. He nodded, saying he understood. He admitted he hadn't realized how much he had been relying on Grandpa's help until it stopped. And now, with those financial responsibilities returned to him, he had been forced to reevaluate everything. I told him I appreciated the honesty, but I also needed space. I was building something new, something that gave me stability and peace. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I would stay in touch, visit occasionally, and remain a part of the family from a distance. But moving back wasn't an option, and I needed him to accept that. He didn't argue. He just nodded again and said he would try. Before we left, he asked me not to stay away too long. I promised I wouldn't, and I meant it in my own way. That dinner was important, even if it didn't solve everything. It helped me see that while I couldn't fix the past, I could control what came next. I was ready to move forward on my own terms, with clear boundaries and a stronger sense of self. Later that week, I visited Grandpa and Grandma again. We sat together in their living room just like we used to. We talked about the future, about school, work, and the kind of life I wanted to create. I told them I wanted to finish college and eventually build a stable career. I said I wanted to give back, to be the kind of person who didn't just survive tough times but used them to grow. They both listened quietly, then smiled. Grandpa told me he was already proud of me. He said it wasn't just about grades or achievements, it was about character, about standing up for myself and not letting others define my worth. Grandma added that no matter what happened, they would always be there for me. Their words meant more than I could express. They gave me the strength to believe in myself. I hugged them both that night, holding on a little longer than usual. As I walked back to my apartment under the night sky, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't sadness or loss, it was a kind of peace. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't afraid. I had learned to stand on my own feet, to draw lines where I needed to, and to lean on the people who truly cared. My family's story had become more complicated than I ever expected. The lines between love and disappointment, support and silence had all blurred. But with time and space, I was learning to navigate it all with care. I would keep my bond with Megan and Jimmy alive. I would check in, show up, and let them know they were not forgotten. At the same time, I would maintain my distance from the parts of the past that had hurt me, knowing I didn't have to carry that pain forever. In my quiet apartment, surrounded by the life I was building one piece at a time, I finally believed that I could do this. With the love and support of my grandparents behind me, and my own courage guiding me forward, I knew I could create a future worth holding on to.